All right, you can be seated. Um, okay, so I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Program teacher certification course class. And tonight we will be again in the parenting manual. Look at that right there. That's what it looks like right there. Parenting manual. Okay. All right. And Katan had done a pretty great job going over the first few pages there, and it starts with you and the what's your respect IQ. One of the things that the Peaceful Solution Character Education does is that it helps us to not only learn how to deal with problems, but we hope it keeps, if we're doing everything right, it surely does alleviate the problems ever popping up. Not to say that you're not going to have a problem every now and then, or conflict, or something take place, especially with people that aren't really trying to keep the peaceful solution. But the bottom line is, we learn a little bit more how to deal with things, how to stay out of trouble's way, and so forth. As you learn the peaceful solution, you kind of look ahead towards things and think, I don't need to go over that way. That's a potential problem over there. What's all that noise? What are those guys gathered up over there for? I probably just need to keep on going this way right here. Police cars coming, you pull over, whether it says you have to or not, you pull over to kind of just let the situation get by, all the hoopla, You see a car parked on the side of the road, you kind of move over in the other lane when you're going around just to avoid problems, like somebody opening a door and falling out on the ground and you running over them or something, So the peaceful solution keeps us guarding against hazards and so forth and moving along. And so we do with our family too. Now this is the parenting manual that we're working with tonight, but nothing has changed in the peaceful solution. It still remains, we start out, we've got the character unit, acceptance, self-control, respect, and responsibility. And we go through those manuals and we learn in detail about those particular things. And then we wrap it up in kind of an advanced, well, it is advanced, not kind of, but an advanced building moral excellence, which covers it all one more time on a little more advanced level. And of course, we've got the parenting manual. For kind of takes the steps in life, if you will. We do have actually not just the character unit and so forth that we use, which is the intermediate, but we also have 1st through 6th grade, or 1st through 5th grade, and available. And those are pretty great booklets too. But nevertheless, we are in the parenting manual tonight, and for those of you that are online, if you don't have a parenting manual, which is the owner's manual for your child, if you don't have it, you can go online and download this right now. In fact, there should be a drop-down menu. If you're watching us on Facebook, up towards the top, you'll see the choices of all the manuals that we've gone through so far, and you could download those and use them for class. I'd like to remind everybody also that this is a teacher's class. We are teachers teaching teachers, and that's what we're doing. We're becoming teachers, okay? This is not, we're not using a student's manual when we're doing this. We're using teachers' manuals, and we have the teacher's manual there for everyone to download, and hopefully everyone out here in the auditorium also has teacher's manuals too, because that's what we're learning. We will actually go through and look at the lesson plans. That's a guide for us, the teacher, on how we're to teach the class. And we'll look at those lesson plans even in this teacher's class. And we'll talk about them, and we'll actually read the lesson plan, right, and follow it through. But in a class where you've got students, you're not teaching teachers, you're teaching students. You might become teachers later on, but nevertheless, you're teaching students. You'll have a student's manual. They'll have a student's manual, and it doesn't have the lesson plan in it. You don't read the lesson plan to the students. You do what it says. You follow the guideline that it's guiding you. Like, for instance, tonight, for all of you teachers, if you'll turn to, and teachers in training, if you'll turn to Lesson Plan 8, page 8B, that is right across the page from page 61. And there's a lesson plan there. Tonight we'll be starting on page 65 when we do get started here. And so if you look at procedure number 6, this procedure is telling you, the teacher, to read the section that starts with you on page 63. All that's already been done. Then allow students to take the test on 64. That was your respect IQ. Encourage them to answer each scenario honestly. And this assignment is for each individual to evaluate themselves honestly. It will not be shared with the class. Then it says to read the section analyzing your respect IQ. Well, that's what we're going to do this evening. And then have students take note of their areas of concern. Encourage them to continue to strive to obtain the very important character trait of respect for themselves and others. And then there's an activity if we want to do it, and if we're in the proper situation. And then in 8, we will also continue on pages 65 and 66 and talk about that a little bit. For now, let's go back to page 65 where we're starting at. So we've already looked at the lesson plan. We know what we're doing, and of course I looked at the lesson plan beforehand, like you should do before you teach a class. You should take plenty of time ahead, whether it be a day in advance or a couple hours in advance or whatever, and take a look at it. Especially if you're not familiar with it, you need to familiarize yourself with the lesson. If you're familiar with it, you still need to look it over before you jump in and do it. Unless, now get this, we always have to be prepared as teachers of the Peaceful Solution to do exactly that, to jump in. Maybe another teacher got sick or something, and so you got to cover what they were going to cover and so forth. You just got to be ready to jump in and go. You should be familiar with the material, and you should be able to do that at any time, really. So be aware of that, because it does occur quite often, okay? All right. So analyzing your respect IQ, and really, let me mention something about this, because it's been touched on a little bit in the past couple classes too. But self-control is the foundation of a great moral character. Well, respect is just like it, because you've got to have respect towards yourself and others and the environment and all living items, all living beings. You have to have respect, and otherwise you can't get any further in this. And to have respect, you got to have self-control, and all of it works. Well, let me show you my little picture. Y'all have seen this before many times. This is the self-control diagram, of course. We're not necessarily talking about self-control so much today, but here we are. We'll go down one. So it starts out with an incident or trigger. And that's what, you heard the saying, well, whatever trips your trigger, that's what it is. Something trips your trigger. And then you start having thoughts. And what you do with these thoughts, first of all, when it comes to the incident or triggers, we can practice the Peaceful Solution and try to limit the amount of these things that come into our lives that might be of a negative nature. So we hope to keep that down some. And then when we do have it, though, we start having thoughts. And depending upon the thoughts we're having, what's going to come after that is the feelings that go with those thoughts. Your emotions start taking over. So you have these thoughts. They're either going to be cool thoughts or hot thoughts. You're either going to be thinking, well, he probably had a rough day. I'm sure he didn't mean to call me stupid, Or I'm sure he didn't mean to yell at me, or this type thing. Or you could be having the hot thought, that was a cool thought. Or you could be having a hot thought like, what's that jerk think he is? He's always doing something. Man, I'm not putting up with this anymore. And it grows from there. Then you start having the feelings, the emotions, the anger, of course, has already kicked in, and you start letting it lead towards rage if you don't snap it in line at that time. And then, of course, then comes the actions, and then the consequences or the rewards, depending upon what action you ended up taking, see? So there's never a feeling without a thought. It's up to you to determine your thoughts in order to control your feelings and your actions. That's a quote from the Peaceful Solution. And all of this stuff works synergistically together, including all the classes that you go through in the Peaceful Solution and everything else, okay? So, sorry about that. All right. So analyzing your respect IQ, remember you got to have self-control too. The test you have just completed was comprised of 20 questions that can be categorized into the 4 main categories. So get this, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 main categories. The first one is self-respect. We're going to talk about that. Then there's respect for others. So you got self, you got others. Then you have property, respect for property, and respect for the environment. Now, where have you heard that before? You've heard that when we're talking about the STOP acronym when dealing with self-control, right? Stop, think, options, proceed. Well, when you're thinking about your options, you want to make sure that option does not hurt yourself. See, number 1. It doesn't hurt others, number 2. And it doesn't hurt property or the environment, see? So, see how everything works together, always, in the Peaceful Solution? Anyway, the correct answer for all the questions is always. You should always do these things. Oh, I just noticed a mistake here. I marked never, and I meant to mark always over here. Okay. I have a few that are marked sometimes. We want to get rid of those sometimes things and get it to the always row there. Now, if you have any that you marked in the never column, hey, time to get rid of those, really bad. You need to really work on those. We want to get rid of, well, for instance, I teach my children to accept people from different cultures. If you marked never, there's a problem there that needs to be dealt with right away. We really need to be working at that. If you mark sometimes, it means, hey, you're trying, you're on your way. And if you mark always, that means, hey, that's not a problem in your life. And you teach your children the same thing, and everything should be going rosy there for you. Okay. So any sometimes or never answers should be acknowledged as areas of concern. These are some of the areas you need to focus on in order to fully develop the character trait of respect. How can you say you have respect if you don't accept people from other cultures? We have an entire manual, one of our lessons that's based upon acceptance, accepting of others, and accepting of, the situation and so forth. All right. Keep in mind that you fully develop the character trait of respect only if you are respectful in all 4 categories. For example, the person who has self-respect but discriminates against others is not a respectful person. In like manner, the individual who cares for his own belongings but would willfully steal or destroy the property of others is not respectful. And when you learn the depth of that word steal, it could be something as simple as, stealing a person's reputation. That's big. That's not small. That's big. But it could be something as simple as, looking around. You need a pencil to write with, and you're looking around. You see one laying on the desk. You reach over and grab it. No one's around. You just grab it and start using it. And then, of course, somebody comes in and asks about it. Hey, where's my pencil? What are you doing with it? But even if they didn't come in and ask about it, you shouldn't take the pencil. If you can't ask first, then you need to leave it alone. And that's a big one. That one right there, something that small, that simple, a lot of people have a problem with that. Piece of paper, pen, pencil, whatever, anything like that. Okay. Let's take a closer look at self-respect. Now, what does self-respect mean to you? Does it mean keeping yourself clean and eating healthy, nutritious food? So you're right on target. Self-respect is all these things and so much more. Self-respect is a quality and ability that enable us to make choices showing care and concern for our own health, well-being, and life in general. Self-respect is manifested in many different ways. Did you know that keeping a home clean and organized is also a form of self-respect? A clean home shows that you care enough about your health to live in an environment that is as sanitary as possible. A person who keeps their home clean and organized is more likely to be healthier and less stressed than someone whose home is a toxic dump site. So a person who keeps her home clean and organized is more likely to be healthier and less stressed than someone whose home is a toxic dump site. And for you guys that are single, well, that's you keeping that's not an excuse not to keep your home clean and organized. I know I've kind of used it before for something like that, but I try to refrain from it now. I guess you could have called it a toxic dump site. I'm not sure, but All right. So let's stop right there and go back and look at the lesson plan, because the next procedure outlined what to do in this portion of page 65 and then, of course, page 66. So there's the activity. It says have students form groups. We're not going to do that today, but you could do that in the right scenario. Number 8, select key points from the section taking a closer look at self-respect on pages 65 and 66. Discuss how having a lack of self-respect can result in risk-taking behavior that can actually endanger a person's life and the lives of others. So what I'm doing right now and reading this lesson plan to you, you won't do this when you're teaching the students, okay? You'll do what it says. When it says select key points, you'll do that. You'll discuss how having a lack of self-respect, you'll do that. But you just won't be reading this to them, the actual lesson plan. It's for you, the teacher. It's your guide. Just like if you didn't have that in here and you had notes on a separate page guiding you on what to do. Okay? I know I might be sounding kind of elementary on that, but I really mean to. So, okay. Of course, it tells us to paraphrase the section that's about clothing too on page 66 and discuss how fashion has contributed to moral decline and lack of self-respect. Okay, so we're doing that, and we were on page 65, and we're about 3/4 of the way down. So, let's see, there's something I want to show you. Oh. I think I got on the, okay. No, we're going to turn back there in a minute. Sorry about that. Let me get situated here. So we talked about what does self-respect mean to you. And so here we go. Another form of self-respect is in avoiding, this is on page 65, about 3/4 of the way down, is in avoiding risky behaviors such as promiscuous sex, extramarital affairs, excessive drinking, and experimenting with illegal and legal drugs. And all these things right here, Hollywood tries to make it seem normal that people do these things, and it's not normal. Now, it's being taught as it's normal, and so people take that and they go and do it. So there's a lot of it going on, but it should not be taking place like that. These are risky behaviors, and they can lead to sexually transmitted diseases, addictions, regrets, and death. Engaging in these types of behaviors is not showing care or concern for one's health, well-being, or life, okay? And, okay, I'm going to do this. I wanted to share this with you real quick. So when we're talking about self-respect, of course, there's certain things you could do, and it's called disrespect, right? And so here's the picture right here, disrespect of self. You know, a man would not dress up like this right here and scurry around. And then we've got, you know, something that really shouldn't be taking place right here too. And the reason I'm telling you this is not that, you know, I don't want these people to have the time of their life or something like that. It's because these things cause problems. It causes problems in people's lives. You know, promiscuous sex, and with what you're looking at right here, when this takes place, there's harm that's done to both individuals. And then, of course, we have the drugs right here, too. And I can tell you there's a lot of harm that takes place with addiction and you might say just party drugs and so forth. It's another kind of disrespect towards animals. We'll talk about that a little bit, you know. But I had these pictures that I had from a previous class. Usually try to hold on to them. You want to take care of your animals too. Remember, we want to show respect to all life. Here is a mom. We're going to talk about this, yelling at her daughter, obviously. Yelling really doesn't get anywhere. As you can see, she's locked down at this point. Yelling is not the way to teach. And then there's disrespect of human life in general. You know, you have human trafficking and abuse, death through war, and, you know, this showing a funeral gathering and all that stuff. So, something to keep in mind, that if you're not respecting, you are disrespecting, okay? That's what I wanted to point out. And when we're talking about this, remember, everything goes together. It's kind of synergistic. Okay, we talked a little bit about keeping your house clean and keeping yourself clean and everything, and probably go into it a little bit more. But effects of a great personal hygiene. I have some things highlighted. I'm just going to read it real quick. Each person's idea of a great personal hygiene might differ slightly because of upbringing, culture, or available resources. I mean, of course, if you don't have any water, you're not going to be taking a bath or a shower that day, right? You have to have water. However, certain basic practices are almost universally accepted as great hygiene. These practices will help you experience the positive effects of great personal hygiene. So here's a couple basics. And these things are necessary for general health, disease prevention, and confidence. Bathing regularly. A shower or bath is not only necessary to remove dirt, bacteria, and external substances, it also helps wash away natural oils and dead skin which build up on the surface of your body. Remember, we're talking about self-respect. That's one of the things we're talking about here. Trimming your nails. Keeping your fingernails and toenails trimmed and in great shape will prevent problems such as infected nails and digits. Also, bacteria can get stuck under nails, increasing the danger of illness or infection. I have many times read articles to another class that I teach with some young men sometimes, but I've read these articles about people who have died of sepsis. And you know how they got it? Biting their fingernails. And their fingernails, you know, they didn't keep their fingernails clean, and so they're biting their fingernails and they're getting fecal matter and, you know, whatever else. They've been touching baskets at Walmart and you know, digging through the dirt with their hands, whatever. But anyway, they bite their fingernails and they get this in their mouth and they get sepsis and they die very quickly, actually. Brushing, it goes really fast. Brushing teeth. Most dentists recommend brushing teeth 2 or 3 times a day. It's personal preference, but you should also floss to clean the area between your teeth. Even back in the old days, they knew about flossing. Depending on your level of oral health, you might also need to use some mouthwash, and it limits oral bacteria, etc. Washing your hands keeps you from contaminating food or bringing unwanted bacteria or viruses to others. And hand washing is helpful before preparing or eating food, touching your face, or preparing your sleeping space. Now, isn't it interesting that it wasn't all that long ago that doctors and health professionals that washed their hands before operating on someone or doing anything with them, they were considered quacks. The ones that wanted to wash their hands and was demanding it of others, they were considered quacks by the health authority at the time. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Until it was proven that washing your hands does keep from killing people, if you're doing anything with them health-wise, okay? All right. Some of the hygiene-related diseases that you might run up against here by not staying clean, and not to say that they couldn't occur anyway. There's things that go down that you have no control of sometimes, or not much control of. You could have a lot of control of it if you started very early in your life and knew the piece of solution and stayed out of harm's way and did things a certain way, right? But athlete's foot, 1, body lice, chronic diarrhea, tooth decay, head lice, hot tub rash, lymphatic filariasis, pinworms, pubic lice, scabies, swimmer's ear, trachoma, recreational water illness, like these flesh-eating bacterias we've been hearing about lately, and something I can't even begin to pronounce, and then, of course, ringworm. That's just a few of them. So that goes along with self-respect. All right. Several years ago, now we're back on page 65, down at the bottom. Several years ago, there was a news story about a woman who left her 2 children, a toddler and 9-month-old. So you got one that's not even a year old, and then a toddler, alone for a few days so she could buy drugs at a party with a new boyfriend. Left them alone for a few days. When she returned home, she found her children dead from starvation and dehydration. Although this is an extreme case, it shows the harm that can occur when individuals lack the important angle of self-respect, because if there was self-respect there, they wouldn't have been doing the drugs in the first place, and they would have had at least some kind of rational thought in their mind on how to take care of the children. But anyway, the important angle is self-respect, that is mental growth or development, where one is able to make wise moral choices and decisions. Our self-respect is also evident in the way we address others. Get this, repeat it. Our own self-respect is also evident in the way we address others. This is at the very bottom of the page on page 65. In the way we address others, especially when we're frustrated. Our words and tone of voice, ringing a bell yet? Our words and tone of voice demonstrate not only the respect we have for other people, but how much respect we have for ourselves. Did we know that? Did we know that when we're going off on someone, or we're using that little sarcastic tone with them or something, did we realize we were showing people how much we don't respect ourselves? Oh, I thought it was just that we're showing we don't respect the others. Well, it's also showing that you don't respect yourself. Isn't that interesting? For instance, an employee becomes upset and curses his boss. The employee might think he's embarrassing his boss, but instead he's really proven how crude and ill-mannered he is, and how much he doesn't even respect himself. So I might say that, it says, for instance, an employee becomes upset and curses his boss. Well, that kind of makes people think that, well, he's using curse words toward them, but it can be anything. If you're demanding that things are done your way instead of the way the boss said, or if you're, disparaging the boss and saying you don't know what you're talking about and this type thing, he's the boss. He's the one that tells you what to do and how to do it. Of course, you can discuss it in a general normal tone, There's nothing wrong with that, and that's the way we should talk to one another. We can talk to one another and ask. And well, boss, I did want to ask you. I've been doing it this way for a long time, and it's proven to be quick and simple. Is it okay to do it that way, or do you specifically want to do it the way you just said? Get clarification on it. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're not doing it in an argumentative manner. All right. Anyway, using foul language, making fun of others, name-calling, and teasing are practiced routinely by adults, often in front of their children. All of these show horrible disrespect for others, but as previously mentioned, they're indicative of the respect we have for ourselves. Someone who has self-respect would not want to be considered as rude, crude, or offensive. I've heard it said before that being rude was just personality. That's not true. The Peaceful Solution teaches us that rudeness is a negative character trait. I mean, there's many places where, and we'll probably, I think, run into it in this book, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, we'll get there. But remember that. Someone who has self-respect would not want to be considered as rude, crude, or offensive. Having self-respect means being careful of the words that come out of your mouth, because they really say a lot about you. Not just, you think you're saying it to someone else and cutting them down, but you're actually cutting yourself down in front of everybody right there. Kind of like when you have a grudge against somebody, and it's just like you drinking a glass of poison and waiting for the other person to die. Same deal. You're the one that's getting hurt by it, not them. It's the same thing with this. Okay, so we're going to jump into this a little bit about clothing. I'm not trying to make anybody mad or upset anybody. Of course, if you allow it to upset you, that's your deal, not mine. I'm giving factual information to you, and how you take it is how you take it. Remember the Peaceful Solution. Remember, we talked about it already. We have triggers, incidents are triggers, then we start having thoughts and feelings. So if you start having bad thoughts about the factual information I'm giving you that can help you, I don't know what to say. We need to start learning how to control our thoughts and feelings and the actions and so forth. So it's about clothing too. Now, have you ever heard the saying, clothes make the man? There's a great deal of truth in these very simple words. How we dress says much about our character. Now, it's not like this. I went to a prison one time, and I'd been walking through the dusty parking lot, and my shoes were pretty dusty and everything. And the chaplain said, she looked at me, and it was the first time I'd ever met her. She was new, and she looked me over, and she looked down at my shoes. I could see her just staring at my shoes. And then she came back and listened to what I was saying for a few minutes, and she said, my dad used to tell me that you can tell a lot about a man's character by the way he takes care of his shoes. Anyway, I sat there and I said, well, that's interesting, but I tend to judge a person's character, by their actions, and what comes from their actions and comes out of their mouth and so forth. But yes, you do want to dress. We're going to talk about it here in just a minute. But just because your shoes have a little dust on it doesn't matter, okay? All right. So clothes make the man. How we dress says much about our character. So here we go. It's talking about this. Clothing has always been associated with dignity. In fact, one of the first acts done by captors to their captives is to strip them of their clothes, thereby reducing them to shame and open humiliation. How ironic, then, that we should voluntarily choose to leave our homes as scantily clad as possible, thereby humiliating our own selves. The bottom line is that just because some designer says that wearing short, tight, see-through clothing is fashionable does not mean it is acceptable or respectable. Why is this included in the parenting manual? Because you're the parent. What you do defines what your child is going to do. If you dress scantily and your daughter grows up and you're dressing scantily as the mother, what do you think she's going to do? She's going to dress scantily also, and then you're going to have a lot of problems on your hands. Okay? And they might do it anyway, whether you have, regardless of how you dress. But there'll be a lot more positive influence on your part towards the child on dressing properly. Of course, there's a lot of negative influences out there that are bombarding all the time too that we have to guard against. And the bottom line is, everyone's got to make their own choice. We can't force anybody to do anything. Now, when they're younger or under your roof or whatever, you can tell them you dress this way, and they need to do that if they're going to continue getting the rewards and benefits of doing the right thing. The consequences or rewards, remember, of the actions, incident, trigger, thoughts, feelings, then the actions, and then comes the consequences or rewards. And so if they're not doing what you want them to do in your household, under your roof, then they have a choice to make, right? They're going to get a consequence or a reward of some type. So, all right. We have a whole other section coming up about how rewards and consequences actually do work, okay? All right, we're not going into that too much right now, though. All right, so it is up to each person to stop and think about the messages they're sending with their choice of clothing. Get that stop and think, self-control. You got to stop, think, consider your options. You got to make a choice, right? Choose the right way. Look at that. Everything works together. Constant, the peaceful solution. Synergistically, everything together all the time. If you had to hire someone to be an ambassador for a country, who would you choose? The person with an impeccable academic record, that means they're very smart and diligent and so forth, dressed in a two-piece suit and a blouse, or the person with an impeccable academic record, dressed in a miniskirt, halter top, knee-high boots. Here's kind of an example right here. This is from one of the other Peaceful Solution books, and you can see, kind of like a visual of what was just said, basically. You look at the two. Which one would you send to represent your company or your nation as an ambassador, as your representative, in trying to get something done? Would you send that person there, or would you send this person right here? So think about that. And for the guys, you consider the same thing right here. Whether, regardless of how smart they are and their ability, the way they're dressed right here, which one would you send in to meet with a representative from a company that you were merging with, or you were going to acquire, or whatever? It's a sales representative. Would you pick this one right here, or would you pick this one right here? So clothes do make a difference. And there's nothing wrong with looking sharp and everything. And I wasn't trying to cut the lady down, the one I was talking about the dust on the shoes, and how she said her dad said you could tell a lot about the character by a man's shoes. But it's not just his shoes, it's the whole person, But yes, dress does say something. If you go into a place, I can tell you now, if you went into one of the prisons as a Peaceful Solution teacher dressed like that right there, you would not be doing it for very long. You probably would not get past the metal detector and all the guards and everything dressed like that. I mean, they would automatically tell you no hoodies, no bandanas, no sunglasses, no hoodies, no torn shirts or pants, and all that stuff. You'd be thrown out the door. I know one of them, you could not go in there with khaki pants on. If you had khaki-colored pants or shirt on, you were sent out the door, no questions asked. You could complain all you wanted, but you were not getting in the door. All right. So, what message do we send to our children when they see us dressed inappropriately? Remember, children learn through our example. They have a natural desire to want to be like their parents. Therefore, it's important that we maintain our self-respect by choosing modest clothing that will reflect our desire to improve our moral character. It's just as important that we dress our children modestly and teach them to choose clothes that are modest, so that as they grow older, they will desire clothing that reflects their moral values. And, there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about. Excuse me. There's a whole lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to clothing and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Being too tight is as important as if it were too short, or showing a lot of skin and so forth. It's disrespectful to yourself and disrespectful to others. And if you're married, it would be disrespectful to your husband, or guys, take your shirt off out there working on a construction project or something. It's just disrespectful to everyone around you, yourself, your wife, and everyone else. So it all works together once again. That's not, I know it seemed like a normal thing to people that everyone should run around without their shirt on and shorts and all that stuff, but it creates a lot of problems, which we're not really going into tonight. Just suffice it to say, that does not reflect a great moral character, okay? All right, let's go on back over here to lesson plan 8, page 8b. And, these behaviors, it can endanger your life. There have been cases where people, because they were dressed a certain way, ended up being abducted, abused, killed, all because of the way they chose to dress that particular day. Now, should it be that way? No. A person, there shouldn't be anybody awaiting someone to come by half dressed, and they go attack them. So we have two parties here doing something wrong. The person that attacks and kills, the monster that does a thing like that, that's never been taught the right way. Yeah, they're a monster at the time. But when you look back over what they grew up with and what they were done, if they were abused and so forth, it might be the only life they know. But then you look at the person that comes along that is not dressed properly and everything, and it triggers something in this other person, and then the thoughts form and the feelings, and then the actions and consequences or rewards. So again, the peaceful solution teaches us to do things modestly and in order, so that we can avoid a lot of the situations and the curses that come to other people. We would never put ourselves in that situation. Is there any teacher or student of the peaceful solution at this time that has been learning the peaceful solution for a long time, been through the classes and everything, and committed to becoming a teacher of the peaceful solution? Is there any one of you that would dress scantily and go out jogging at 2 o'clock in the morning? Whether there's lights on the street or not lights on the street. Would you do that? If you are, then you haven't stopped and used the basics of self-control, and you're not showing that you respect yourself or others, and you definitely have not stopped and thought and considered your options and proceeded with the right choice, because you would have considered that you could get in a lot of trouble out there at 2 o'clock in the morning. You shouldn't even be out there, So the peaceful solution keeps us out of harm's way. And that's what we're talking about here. And this is what we want to get across to our children also. When the title of this lesson is Teaching Children About Respect, we can talk to them all we want. We can spout stuff from our mouth all day long, and it goes in one ear and out the other a lot of times, especially with teenagers. All they hear is, and that's what they hear. They don't even, what'd you say? Huh? That's the one right there. You say something to them, they say, huh? And it gives them an opportunity to think about what they're going to say to you. Right? Anyway, so thinking about these things, teaching children about respect, you do it with your actions too, not just your words. And so I'm sitting here thinking right now that there's things I do from time to time in when I'm around other people that I think back on and say, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did that come out of my mouth? That's something that I used to would have said. That's not me now. And so I look back on it and I'm like, okay, I need to adjust that. And that's what we do. That's what the Peaceful Solution teaches us to do. It's like a mirror. You're standing in front of the mirror, looking at yourself, and you're seeing deeper, under that skin. You're seeing what's really going on with you, right? And how you can get in there and dig deep, and dig some of that stuff out and change. So, let's take a look at that lesson plan again. All right. So, on procedure number 9, summarize the first paragraph under the heading Positive Goals Helps Build Self-Respect on page 67, and allow students to write in their goals on pages 67 and 68. If time permits, allow a few volunteers to share with the class, read and discuss the section. It says to emphasize that adults, we must make a conscious, diligent effort to not only teach respect, but to make sure that our children demonstrate respect to themselves, others, property, and the environment. So, and the way we would emphasize that is through, talking about it, maybe present some articles and go over it. You wouldn't necessarily say that, of course, emphasize, but emphasis on something, and surely you could speak very loudly and read that as adults we must make a conscious, diligent effort. Well, you're emphasizing it, but you're not really. You're not explaining it. Emphasizing in the Peaceful Solution should be explaining what's going on, to talk about it a little bit, try to get it through. It's like in the previous section right there, we did discuss a little bit about the dress code and so forth, if you will, and discuss how fashion has contributed to moral decline and a lack of self-respect. Well, one of the ways, just like we said with Hollywood, remember Hollywood? Hollywood, as California goes, so goes the world, because Hollywood is located in California, and whatever Hollywood does and the way that the Hollywood starlets and stars dress is the way the world dresses, So that fashion, the fashion runways, the fashion chic, the awards shows that are in that go on, people dress to the hilt. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that they have much material on their bodies. A lot of times they're very scantily clad, but with what they call the top fashion designer clothes, And so these fashions has contributed to the moral decline through depraved lust, lack of self-control, disrespect, all these things that we're talking about. Let's turn on over to page 67. Excuse me. Positive goals help build self-respect. Excuse me. Other important aspects of developing self-respect are to have purpose, goals, and a strong work ethic. Now, one of the things in that sentence right there, to have purpose. One of the things the Peaceful Solution does for us, it helps us to find our purpose. It helps us to have purpose, to know that everybody in life has a purpose. Everyone is valuable. Everyone I'm sitting here looking at right now in the auditorium, everyone out there online that's watching right now in the classes, and I know William's probably out there right now with a class, who knows, might be watching. Whatever the case, we learn that the purpose is to spread this, the proper moral character, the proper way to conduct ourselves to avoid problems in our lives. We want to get this into everyone's life. Peace, that's what it's called, peace. It's true peace. And that's what we'd like to do. And it really is helpful. So Our purpose, as all of these here in the auditorium at least are, I know they know, our purpose is to learn the peaceful solution, learn how to teach the peaceful solution, and go and do it. So we can learn what to teach and then teach what we've learned. That's been a main goal that the author of the peaceful solution, Yisroel Hawkins, told us about over and over again. He said, learn it, learn what to teach first, and then go out and teach. You can't just look at it and say, I think I'm going to have self-control today. I'm going to go out here and tell these people all about it. No, don't work that way, okay? All right. And then it talks about having goals and a strong work ethic, all right? So a strong work ethic. I was talking to more than one business owner. I was talking to a business owner this week. I talked to one 2 weeks ago, and another one not that long before that, and they were addressing their dismay about how it's so hard to find people that want to work. They couldn't believe that a person works 3 months, 6 months, whatever, and then they go get another job. They jump jobs to get 25 cents or 50 cents more an hour or whatever. Then they go and jump jobs again, and they're not getting any time in and any real experience. And they'll jump from this to that to another, and then back to whatever it was they were doing that they liked the most for a while. And then you ask them, how long have you been installing Windows or something? They might say, well, I've been doing that for 20 years. When what he really meant to say, he's been doing it for a year and a half, but over a period of 20 years, from jumping from job to job to job to job to job, not creating any stability, not being able to get the best jobs, and so forth. And that's one of the things that the men were talking about, is how crazy it is out there these days, and how everyone wants everything handed on a silver platter to them. They said it that way, but they were dismayed that there was not a strong work ethic out there like at one point in a lot of our lives. If you went back 50 years, it was considered a great thing to have a strong work ethic and go to a job, put your time in, learn what to do, and really get established in it. And then, if something came along and you wanted to advance and maybe you couldn't with that company, then you looked into something else, but only after establishing yourself. Having purpose gives you a general direction, and I'm not, so there might be some of you that don't agree with me, and that's fine. I'm not trying to argue with anyone or anything like that, but having purpose gives you a general direction in which to focus your thoughts and energy. Desiring to lead a productive, fulfilling life is one example of what it means to have purpose. Without a positive purpose, life tends to lose direction, and it becomes easy to drift aimlessly from one day to the next. No goals, no purpose, just, all right, well, I'm going to work today. Whatever comes my way is what comes my way. And you have no plans or anything. You just go do whatever it is. And then when something comes up, you go do it. And something else comes up and you go do it. That's not a way. It's not a way to go. It's not a way to live. Purpose gives us the determination to meet deadlines, accomplish tasks, and lead useful lives. And along the way, it's not to say that a person might not have a little trouble getting motivated sometimes, or possibly something has occurred in their life and they might be having suffering a little bit of depression that they haven't learned how to snap out of or something. It can be done. All these things can be done. And the main thing is it can be done if you have purpose in your life. If you know that you have purpose in your life, you can snap out of these things rather quickly. It might still come, but you can snap out of it. Procrastination is another thing. I can think about one of the popular sayings was, why do today what you could put off till tomorrow? Well, that's the procrastinator's creed, and that's not the way it should be. If you got something and you need to do it, go and you have time to do it, and you got the stuff to do it with, and everything falls in place, go ahead and do it. I'm preaching to myself right now too, big time. So it's a constant reminder. And purpose gives us that ability to be able to put that into gear and put it to work in our lives. Okay. Well, purpose gives us that determination to meet deadlines, accomplish tasks, lead useful lives, and along with having purpose, excuse me, it is also important to have positive, achievable goals. A goal is an end that you strive to attain. By taking this parenting course, you are working towards the goal of becoming a positive, more effective parent. And that should be one of the goals in your life, and a purpose. One of the purposes in your life is to become that parent, that one that can raise that child and, pop open the top of their head and pour this stuff in as much as you can. But of course they have to learn along the way and make choices and learn how to deal with the influences and the negative things that come their way. So everyone has to choose, All right. So what other positive goals can you set and work towards achieving? The great thing about setting goals is that it's up to you how many goals you work on. Goals of self-improvement, such as controlling one's temper, getting to work on time, spending more time with your children, are all worth pursuing and achieving. By assessing your needs and wants, you can determine the goals you would like to accomplish. Notice it does say your needs and wants. There's a definite line drawn there between your needs and wants. And a lot of people think their wants are their needs, but that's not necessarily so. When it comes to setting and achieving goals, having a positive work ethic can make the difference between success and failure. A positive work ethic enables you to pursue your goals with moral character. Traits such as determination, honesty, responsibility, discipline, self-control, and perseverance are only some of the moral character traits that constitute a positive work ethic. And I might say, consistency. I want to bring that up again. We haven't talked about consistency so much tonight, but it's very important to be consistent in all these things, just like the positive work ethic. You can't go in there one day and be Johnny on the spot, there on time, ready to do whatever it takes, go get the job done, honest about everything, and, just doing it all, right? Helping out in any way you can. And then the next day you come in and you're dragging your feet, you're 5 minutes late, you're complaining and not getting the job done, and your machine, if you're on an assembly line, your machine's running behind everybody else's and everything. And so you have a bad day, and then the next day you're Johnny on the spot again, blah, 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 da, da. What do you think they're going to remember? They're probably going to remember the worst time you had. So it's important to try to be consistent in all these things. If you're going to have a positive work ethic, have the positive work ethic. Do it over and over again. Not to say that you're not going to have a bad day. Everyone has a bad day every now and then, and sometimes we make bad choices. And as we know, anybody who's been in the Peaceful Solution for any time, we know that if we make one of those bad choices, what do? We determine in our mind, we set our mind in advance to do it better next time, right? And we remember not to kick ourselves too hard, because we have to leave ourselves room to grow. We already know that we're going to make a few bad choices, we're going to make some mistakes, and so we have to be able to have enough self-control and self-respect with ourselves, and enough forgiveness too, to go at it again. All right? Got it? Okay. Well, that's about where we're going to leave off tonight. That's a great spot right there. So let's just say halfway on page 67 is where we're going to start up again. And that's going to be on 8/20/2025. That's this coming Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. And we'll be in the parenting manual and on page 67, about halfway down the page. And we'll probably do just a little quick review and then jump on the setting the goals. We've got a few pages to look at coming in there. and we might even finish up and be ready for chapter 9 when Chris gets here next week. So thank you for coming tonight. We look forward to seeing you again, and remember to be consistent in practicing your self-respect and your self-control, and let's work together in the peaceful solution. Thank you.